The Kentucky Wildcats officially have their next head coach. And after mulling it over and doing a little bit of research, I think Kentucky made a great hire in Mark Pope.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing the hire of Mark Pope as the new head coach of the Kentucky Wildcats. I think this is a great hire that Kentucky basketball has made. Going to talk about why on today's episode. Going to discuss some players entering the transfer portal from BYU, where Pope is from. Could they be heading to Lexington? More than likely, sources indicate yes. And then finally going to talk about Reed Sheppard, his possibility of returning to the Wildcats, as well as a comment from Rick Pitino, former Kentucky head coach and current head coach of St. John's. Absolutely loved what he had to say about this hire on social media. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel already, please go ahead and do so. Now is the time to do it. We got a new head coach. A new era of Kentucky basketball is underway, and I would love to have you guys here along for the ride, whether you are listening on podcast, wherever you are tuned in on podcast, or watching on YouTube. And thank you to everyone who has subscribed, commented, given their thoughts over the last few days of all of this madness unfolding. Everything went pretty quickly, from Cal going to Arkansas to Kentucky landing their guy in Mark Pope. I really appreciate everybody tuning in. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. I think that this is a great hire for Kentucky basketball. Mark Pope of the BYU Cougars spent a few seasons there, also head coach at Utah Valley for a few seasons before his time in Provo. Mark Pope is a Kentucky Wildcat through and through. He played on the 1996 National Championship squad, also played for the University of Washington before transferring to Kentucky. Absolutely love his energy, first and foremost, as a former Kentucky player. He loves this place. He loves Lexington. He loves Kentucky basketball, and he understands the pressure that comes with this job. He understands what Kentucky is about, and I absolutely love that in Kentucky's next head coach. For a guy to come in and understand, not just understand, but to have physically lived through the expectations. There was a video that surfaced from the Field of 68. If you don't know who they are, I know a lot of you guys that are subscribed here also watch them as well. There was a videos that resurfaced of an interview that they did with him, I think a few weeks ago, and he got to talk about, just the pressure in that 1996 season, understanding that if they did not win the entire thing, there would just be immense disappointment. They would have failed massively, and he understood just how serious it was heading into that UMass game, actually against Coach Cal in the UMass Minutemen. The man understands UK basketball, first and foremost. The second thing that I think we need to talk about with Mark Pope, and we will talk about this a ton this offseason because it's very fascinating. This is a very bright basketball mind who has a phenomenal offense. Hoops Vision 68 is a very good basketball channel. I believe his name is Jordan on Twitter, if you want to go find him. Does excellent breakdowns, not just of statistics with college basketball, but also film analysis. He put out a couple of really good videos over the past couple of years about Mark Pope and his offense at BYU. It's video game-esque. They shoot a lot of threes. They play with a lot of tempo, and they really stress defenses out with the right personnel. And this past season, it was borderline unstoppable at times, the way that BYU liked to run their system. Even whenever teams slowed them down tempo-wise, BYU is still able to find a really good shot on almost every single possession. The offense is going to change, I think. It's almost, if you want to compare it to a coach in the SEC, it's Nate Oates-esque, the way that BYU likes to play their offense. Now, they like to operate a little bit more in the mid-range, unlike Alabama does, but I think that that's fine, given just how efficient they were inside the arc. A bright basketball mind who understands this place very, very well. and a man that I think can instill some change compared to what we have seen over the last few years. Obviously, it's been ineptitude with John Calipari, who continue to bring in and year out a number of very talented, high-profile five-star recruits, and Kentucky was just simply unable to capitalize on any of their talents. Oscar Tshiebwe, a transfer from West Virginia, came in, is one of the best rebounders in college basketball history. Kentucky wasn't able to do anything with him. This past year, we saw the number of high-profile guards that Kentucky had on their roster. 5 stars littered everywhere you looked, and Kentucky got bounced in the first round against Oakland. Something that I also want to point out, Kentucky went 23-10. If I'm not mistaken, this past year, BYU went 23-11, and BYU did it without any 5 stars, and Kentucky had, like I just mentioned, literally won at almost every single position, essentially every single position, if you want to break it down by just the depth chart. So Mark Pope, with recruiting limitations at BYU, was able to run a very efficient offense, have just as much success as Kentucky in the win-loss column in a much more difficult conference, is a smart man, understands this program, loves this program, and is going to bring change. He's going to bring change. It's not just the fresh offense. He had a really good defense to boot. BYU was really solid inside the arc last season. You're going to see better in-game adjustments. You are going to see an actual coach. This is something that I think a lot of people felt frustrated with Coach Cal. He was a very, very, very good recruiter, but lacked when it came to X's and O's. Mark Pope, Mark Pope has X's and O's in spades. In spades. He is going to be able to make in-game adjustments like nobody else. It's just tweaking the system instead of having to bring in a completely new roster every single year and having to game plan around it time in and time out. Here's a quote here from Mark Pope to kind of wrap my thoughts up. Again, we're going to be talking about this so much over these next few months, even with Kentucky basketball. So make sure you subscribe. Here's a quote from Mark Pope about his hire. The University of Kentucky is the pinnacle of coaching in college basketball. It is the definition of a blue blood program where hanging a banner is the expectation every year. Equally as important, UK changed my life forever as a human being. The love and passion I have for this program, this university, and the people of the Commonwealth goes to the depth of my soul. I'm thankful to Dr. Eli and Mitch Barnhart for this opportunity. I'm proud to be your next head coach, and I can't wait to do this together. Smart man, knows the program, knows how to coach, knows how to bring in a system. This man will be successful with the University of Kentucky. It may take a couple of years to establish himself, but there are a number of great coaches that have had to do the exact same thing. I want to talk about that a little bit more in depth. Before we do dive into that, though, there are some players in this personnel grouping that I want to discuss with Mark Pope and his system that were playing at BYU and playing very well, that are in the transfer portal and very well just may come to Kentucky. Before we dive into talking about those 3 players, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. You can keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, continuing along here on the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. I really appreciate you guys tuning into the show today. Thank you so much to everyone who has been listening over the last week or so. Thank you so much if you have subscribed. If you have not already, podcast, YouTube, wherever you are tuned in, please go ahead and do so. I would love to have you here. If you've not commented about how you feel about this Mark Pope hire, leave it in the YouTube comments below. At Locked On UK on the socials, on Twitter, rather, is where you can find me. Leave me a DM, tag me in a tweet. Let me know what you think about this. I am excited. This is a smart hire. Mitch Barnhart, for all the things that we can say about him individually, if he gets this right, he will have stuck himself out on a limb to go get a younger, less experienced coach with no tournament wins. And if it pans out, this is going to look excellent in the rearview mirror. It's going to look very impressive for him. And obviously, in turn, it would look very impressive for Kentucky. So we talked about Pope. We talked about how smart of an offensive mind he is. Within that offense, there were a few players last year that really helped make it go. A high-octane, up-tempo, three-point shooting team. Some of them have already entered the transfer portal. And the big name I want to start here with is Jaxson Robinson, the leading scorer from the leading scoring offense in the Big 12 last year. By the way, hey, let's back this up for a second. The Big 12, known for a rough and tumble, defense-oriented conference that is just a slog to have to tread through. It is very, very tough sledding out there in the Big 12. And it was this season for a lot of teams, including Kansas, by the way. BYU averaged 82 points per game, tops in the Big 12. That offense is going to do numbers in the SEC. I'm just saying, and that's not to say the SEC's bad. Mark Pope's going to do numbers in the SEC. For Jaxson Robinson, the leading scorer, 6'7" guard. 6'7" guard, 190 pounds, would be a fifth-year senior. Came off the bench for the most part for the Cougars last year as the leading scorer. Yeah. 14.2 points per game. Shot 35.5% from three. Shot 53.2% from inside the arc. Very solid number there. Shot 90% from the foul line. 90%. Almost 91. 2.5 rebounds. 1.3 assists. 0.7 steals, rather, I should say. And again, a very tough conference. In case you didn't know, Jaxson Robinson has been in the SEC before. Not just at one school, but two. He started his career as an Arkansas Razorback and only appeared in 14 games. He started his career as a Texas A&M Aggie, only appeared in 14 games. Then he went to Arkansas, 16 games for a sophomore Jaxson Robinson. And then he transferred to BYU, 8.5 points per game in his first season out in Provo. BYU obviously in the WCC before they went to the Big 12 this past year, and his numbers got even better. Every single year, he's become a better three-point shooter. In 2020, 28.6% from three, then 32.6% from three, 34.3%, and then obviously, like I said, this past year, 35.5. The kid has range. Think a Duthiero's body with just as good of handles, and I think honestly a better ball handler, and then an excellent, aggressive outside shooter. 35.5%. You go and watch. He's got some it's within the system. He's got some smart shot selection. I think he's an intelligent player. I think he's a talented player. Obviously, with his height and weight, you love that at 6'7", 190, 195. You could absolutely work with this as a two guard, as somebody that if Mark Pope wanted to bring him off the bench. You look last year, Jaxson Robinson primarily played the three, just barely played the two at times, occasionally played the four. The man handles the ball so so well, and he's extremely versatile. This is a piece that I think would be very, very, very nice to have in the SEC first year for Jaxson Robinson. Dallin Hall, I believe, is his name. Dallin, I believe that's how you pronounce it. Has played 2 years at BYU, has played 1 year, at BYU. 6'4", almost 200 pounds, sophomore, 36% shooter from outside the arc, 50% shooter from inside the arc. And he did his damage as essentially a 6'4", 6'5" wing in some of BYU's biggest games last year. We look at some of his numbers here. 18 points in a win against San Diego State. 18 points at Kansas. 17 points at Oklahoma. 13 at a neutral site against NC State, who made the Final Four. 13 points against on the road at Baylor. All of those, 4 out of those 3 games being wins, and then the Baylor game in the regular season being a tough loss for the Cougars. But he played very well in some of their biggest competition, against some of their biggest competition. I would encourage you to go and watch that Kansas game, the one at Kansas. I believe 76-68 was the final score. Later in the season, on the road, big time win for the Cougs. Dallin Hall stepped up in isolation as a contributor, distributing the ball as well. He hit a huge ISO 3 on Hunter Dickinson, where he just took him to school, stepped back, knocked it down top of the key, and that was essentially the dagger at the end of that game. He's got size. He can shoot. He's also crafty getting to the rim. He's got the size to drive and finish as a cutter. He can absolutely cut and slice his way to the basket and finish pretty consistently. Dallin Hall, a player that has also entered the transfer portal that Kentucky could look at. And then there's one more player here that the Wildcats could consider that may be the most interesting of them all, that has entered the portal with a do not contact tag, meaning he's not going to be contacted by anybody. He knows where he's going. This man's probably going to end up at Kentucky. His name is Aly Khalifa. Aly Khalifa. 6'11", 6'10", 270-pound junior. 6'11", 270, not that bad. I'll go ahead and throw out the knock on Aly Khalifa, just the negative here real quick. He's not that athletic. He's not. He's not a massive run and dunk man. He's not like Utah State's big man that we talked about a few days ago. This man is not jumping out of the gym. But what he is an asset on the offensive end of the floor. 5.7 points per game, 4 assists per game, 3.7 rebounds, while shooting just 38.6% from the floor, 49% from inside the arc. Did not take a ton of threes, but was shooting 31.5% from beyond the arc. You may say, Lance, those are not phenomenal numbers. Why do we care about Aly Khalifa? Well, he led the team in assist rate at 32.8%. And if 32.8% assist rate means nothing to you, for reference, Rob Dillingham had an assist rate of 29.8%. This was BYU's starting 5, man. This was their center leading the team in assist rate by a wide margin. Here's some statistics from Evan, I believe it's Miyakawa. Miyakawa. Evan Mia has a phenomenal basketball analytics website. Here's what he said about Khalifa. Khalifa is a really nice piece for BYU with at least 2 or more seasons of eligibility. Remaining as a sophomore, the 6'10" forward show that he can score the ball at an efficient clip, including some great numbers from 3. He actually shot 38% just a season prior at Charlotte, which is where he transferred to before transferring to BYU. His overall impact for Charlotte was really good as he finished 10th in the CUSA and BPR, the best mark in the conference outside of the big 3 of FAU, UAB, and North Texas. He had the 4th best box offensive BPR in the conference as well, indicating that his offensive stats are high level. So while he wasn't necessarily a high-profile scorer at Charlotte, just 11.7 points per game, he was still cooking. He was very much so cooking. Here's the stat here from Sean Vinzel of Hoops Insight. Aly Khalifa assisted on 32.6% of his teammates' made basket when he was in the game last season. For comparison, Dillingham, like I said, was at 29.8%. Shepard was at 24.2%. He's probably the best passing big man in the country. And there's not a whole lot to argue with there. He can handle. He can knock down outside shots and pick and pop. He fits very well into the Mark Pope system. Excellent distributor of the basketball, and I mean excellent distributor. So who's to say Aly Khalifa wouldn't be a fun addition off the bench for Kentucky next season? I say yes, or starting. I mean, honestly, Kentucky could run two different centers here. One of them being Zvonimir Ivasic if they wanted to. Just saying. And they could be pretty fine. I like all three of these guys. I like all three of them. I think that they would fit in Pope's system well. I think all three of them, to some degree, could contribute to winning at a high rate in the SEC. There are two Kentucky players that I want to talk about today that could also fit this system, that could come back. Reed Sheppard and Joey Hart. Let's talk about those guys in just a second. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at GameTime. I know the MLB season has just begun. A lot of Braves and Reds fans here on the show. Let's say you want to go check out an old baseball game down at the ballpark, whether you are near Cincinnati or near Atlanta. There is one place that you need to go to buy all of your tickets, and that is GameTime. GameTime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch, and they've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. They take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. That lowest price guarantee means if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. There are no surprise fees at checkout. They've got all-in pricing, and I loved using GameTime last year during college football season, and I'm going to be using them even more again during the MLB season this year. So you need to go and take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with GameTime. You can download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, continuing along here on the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Before actually we talk about the Reed Sheppard, Joey Hart situation, two guys that I think could, as shooters, fit very well in this system here for Mark Pope. I want to kind of take a different direction for just a second. I want to talk about what Rick Pitino had to say on Twitter earlier about this hire for Mark Pope. At Real Pitino on Twitter, he put out about a 2-minute video talking about how excited he was for Mark Pope to get the job with the Kentucky Wildcats. I want to play that for you guys here today, so just listen here. This is what Pitino had to say about the hiring of Mark Pope.
What a special day for the University of Kentucky. The leader, the captain of the Untouchables, is coming home to lead the Wildcats. A lot of people out there talk about Jay Wright, Danny Hurley, Billy Donovan. They all had their trials and tribulations as well early on. But Mark Pope went into the Big 12 this year, beat Kansas as Kansas beat Baylor at home, and in his first year got to the NCAA. Mark Pope, offensively, no one does it better. The way his teams move, the way his teams shoot the three, the ball movement, the player movement is outstanding. What you don't realize, it took Jay Wright 11 years to finally get an NCAA win. Billy Donovan was at Marshall for 2 years, didn't have an NCAA appearance. He went on to greatness. Mark Pope will go on to greatness. You can put it down. He's not only a Rhodes Scholar candidate, but I remember as if it's yesterday, John Pelfrey getting misty eyes in my first year as a basketball coach at Kentucky. Every time he put on the uniform, he was near tears. And I said to him, John, what is with you every time you put that uniform on? He said, Coach, you just don't understand what this means to all of us from Kentucky. Well, I can guarantee you one thing. Nobody epitomizes the name Kentucky on the front of the jersey more than Mark Pope. What some of you don't realize is how good a basketball mind he has, how much of a relentless recruiter he will be. Now, recruiting's different today. We're now coaching all pros. The NIL has taken away amateur basketball and has made them professional athletes. I'm sure Kentucky's going to have a strong NIL. You have one of the premier young coaches in the game. Relish it, because he will do you proud. I know I sit here today at St. John's and I couldn't be any more prouder than to see Mark Pope lead the Kentucky Wildcats to another championship. He'll get it done. He's got the right stock, he's got a beautiful family, and he absolutely loves Kentucky across his chest. Get it done, Mark. I love you. You're going to do a fabulous job.
And that is Rick Pitino talking about Mark Pope and the job that he believes that he will do with the Kentucky Wildcats. Just first-class stuff there from Rick Pitino. Just excellent, excellent words from the former Kentucky Wildcat coach. Love that video, love that statement, putting that stuff out like that. Again, it's just high-quality first-class. Shows you what kind of man Rick Pitino is. Loved that a lot. And I think he's right. I think he's absolutely right. And there's one piece that I think if Mark Pope is able to get back this offseason, Kentucky fans will go insane over, and that is Reed Sheppard. Obviously, freshman of the year this past season in college basketball, the nation's best three-point shooter, the best three-point shooter that I've seen ever come through Kentucky, probably going to the draft, almost more than likely going to the NBA draft as a projected lottery pick. He's so good. My expectation is for him to be gone. He hasn't left yet. Jeff Shepard, his father, has come out and said that there have been conversations between Jeff and Mark Pope about his son, and there are decisions to be made. Mark's going to try and get him to come back as he should, and if he does, Shepard would be elite in that system. I mean, just out of this world elite in that system. And Joey Hart, apparently, according to reports, is very much so interested in potentially coming back to Kentucky as well, as a 6'5", 200-pound guard. He would be good in this system as a shooter. BYU, with taller guys that are just knocking down outside shots, hey, bring them all in. Guys like Jaxson Robinson at 6'7", bring them in. Alabama's had a couple of guys enter the transfer portal at that are taller wings that can shoot threes. Bring them in. Absolutely. It's going to be very tough for Mark Pope to get Reed Sheppard back, but I think he could get it done. Rick Pitino is absolutely right. I think Mark Pope is going to crush it at Kentucky. And I have a couple of notes here to close us out. And these are tweets here that I saw, I believe one of them from Seth Davis Hoops. And I want to read these two things here to you before we kind of wrap things up. The year before he was hired at Duke, Coach K went 9-17 at Army. Roy Williams was the third assistant at UNC when he was hired by Kansas. Tom Izzo had never been a head coach when he was hired at Michigan State. Jay Wright never won a tournament game at Hofstra. Dan Hurley was 113-82 at Rhode Island before he was hired by UConn. Jay Wright was 122-85 before being hired at Villanova. He was at Hofstra prior. Billy Donovan was 35-20 at Marshall before he was hired at Florida. Bill Self was 78-24 before his hiring at Kansas. He was previously at Illinois. Nate Oates was 96-43 at Buffalo before being hired at Alabama. Mark Pope is not alone. There are dozens of examples across college basketball history, and most recently, almost 8 or 9 different prime examples of college basketball coaches who did not have the resume but had the potential and came into a new job and started to perform. Better universities with better programs and better resources make good coaches better. Mark Pope, I believe, is going to be one of those coaches. He will succeed at Kentucky. You can leave your thoughts on the Mark Pope hire in the comments below at Locked On UK on socials is where you can find me as well. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_ and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all on Monday for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Have a great rest of your day, and God bless.